Archaeology porn.
All right, so right off the bat, I'll have to admit that I am not one for period dramas, though I must admit this genre has certainly experienced a resurgence in recent years, from Downton Abbey to Bridgerton, The Crown to Sanditon. But one which caught my attention because of its focus on archaeology was the 2021 film, The Dig, which chronicled one of the most amazing archaeological finds in British history, the Sutton Hoo ship burial. Now, I wasn't a super fan of this due to its insertion of certain narratives and romances and vilification of characters who were actually real people.
You bitch.
But it did capture the awesomeness of this iconic site and the sometimes haphazard nature of archaeology. But in this episode, we are going to dig a little deeper, pun intended. Today, we are zeroing in on probably the most amazing artifact from that dig, the helmet, steeped in more intrigue than a period drama and shrouded in enough mystery to keep archaeologists and historians fighting over it after all these decades. And you know how brutal those academic brawls can be. Buckle up, we are going off on a wild Anglo-Saxon ride. The year is 1939 and Britain is preparing for the inevitable outbreak of what would become World War II. But in rural Suffolk, they're not really feeling that. There, a landlord named Edith Pretty has commissioned an amateur archaeologist named Basil Brown to investigate some mysterious mounds on her property. Cut to a treasure hunter's fever dream, and Basil and his team have uncovered a massive Anglo-Saxon ship burial, complete with a treasure trove of artifacts.
Why would anyone want to bury a ship?
I would expect this is a grave of a warrior or a king.
By the way, the filmmakers really did make Basil quite the charming underdog, didn't they?
And untrained.
So that's his reference, is it? Well, I'm not untrained. I've been on digs since I was old enough to hold a trowel.
Reality check? He actually was rather underpaid and underappreciated in his day by the Oxbridge men. But I digress. Among all the finds, the helmet stands out as one of the most unique. However, I hate to burst your bubble, it was not found intact, but in millions of little pieces. Yay, jigsaw puzzle lovers, here's a job for you. Perhaps you can be a small find specialist. So what you see today was painstakingly put back together. But what makes the helmet so unique? Well, it's sort of like a Fabergé egg mixed in with some ancient tools. It was functional, but it was meant to make a statement. Made out of tinned bronze, it really was a high-status item. And conservationists put it back together in 2 attempts. The first restoration in 1947 was wrong. Oops. So in 1968, they tried again, this time using more evidence from the pieces themselves, and that's what you're going to see today. Looking at it close today, you'd see intricate scenes carved on its surface. A mounted warrior riding over a fallen soldier. Warriors wearing funny headgear battling with spears. But most striking is the face, which has human features like a mouth, nose, and eyebrows. But hidden in that is animal imagery like heads of tusked boars and a dragon. Because if you look closely, the whole eyes, nose, and mouth assemblage is a giant dragon, with the eyebrows being the wings. And once you see that, you will not be able to unsee it. It is truly a piece of amazing craftsmanship, even more so because it was produced in Britain or elsewhere in Northern Europe, far on the fringes of what was then high civilization. Rome, complete with its large cities, industrial production, high society, and yes, indoor heating and plumbing.
Greatest invention to hit Rome. It moves water from one place to another. It's astounding. It's amazing. Get on the bandwagon. Pipe the right out of your house.
Now, with a piece this intricate, reconstructing the thing was no joke, and both attempts took over a year. Conservators used temporary plaster forms and metal pins to hold hundreds of fragments in place while figuring out its original shape. Some pieces were so corroded that identifying their texture, thickness, or design felt like doing open heart surgery blindfolded. The process was painstaking, but the second restoration finally unveiled details like the cheek pieces, neck guard, and face mask, and voila, the masterpiece we know today. As you can see, the helmet was definitely not just functional. This was a piece of gear made for a king or high-ranking warrior. Can we talk about eyebrows made of silver garnets shaped like boar heads? Because that just screams,
"Don't me, fellas! This ain't my first time at the rodeo."
Now on to the burning question. Who was meant to wear such a thing? Well, the leading theory, that would be King Rædwald of East Anglia, the Rædwald, or sort of high king, who reigned over the other 6 kingdoms in what was then known as the Heptarchy, before England was unified. Now, I know what you're thinking. Doesn't a king wear a crown?
Perfect fit, sire.
Well, not quite yet. The traditional crown we all know and love actually didn't come about more to the high Middle Ages, like the 11th century. So a lot of those depictions you see of kings from this time are just plain wrong. And this one here came from the BBC, no less. And though we won't go into the burial assemblage in depth just now, there were plenty of goods of foreign manufacture, or at least influence. There was Byzantine silverware, Frankish coins, and the mysterious whetstone or scepter with clear Scandinavian styling. So this was a guy who had vast diplomatic and/or trading relationships. And beyond its imagery, which is typically Anglo-Saxon, the helmet's form, namely those cheek and neck guards, are characteristic of Byzantine pieces. So what this tells us is that in 7th century England, appearing cosmopolitan was not about Instagram followers. It was about owning and flaunting objects that evoked the Byzantine Empire, then seen as the successor to the Roman Empire. So you've got this helmet, the Frankish coins, and the whetstone, which showed that the Anglo-Saxons didn't see themselves as some isolated culture on the edge of the world, but in fact were part of a connected, globalized early medieval world. Serious influencer vibes, circa AD 600. But buckle up, because this is where the plot thickens. In January 2025, Dr. Helen Gittos of Oxford University posited a novel theory. According to her, this helmet may not just have been gifts or loot from some king, but in fact were the personal possessions of mercenaries who had fought for the Byzantine army. Artifacts like the helmet and the chainmail coat, which is so corroded it looks like a turd, well, these had design features of Byzantine armor. So the argument is that the Anglo-Saxons, who were noted warriors and horsemen, were just the type of employees that the Byzantine military needed as it fought off the Sassanian Persians in the Eastern Mediterranean around 575 AD. And why not? Byzantine material has been found all over early medieval Britain, particularly in graves. And there's even one standout site, a beach in Cornwall, where it's argued that Byzantine traders came directly. And the Byzantines did not discriminate. They recruited mercenaries far and wide, as we already saw with Harald Hardrada of Norway, who lived a few hundred years after this. So that would make sense. An Anglo-Saxon warrior goes all the way to Byzantium to find his fortune and comes back with some bling. I mean, who doesn't take some souvenirs home from a long work trip? This, of course, remains speculative, but it's definitely a plausible theory. Now, if you want to see the helmet today, you'll have to make it to the British Museum, just a couple of blocks away from here, where there is a purpose-built gallery filled with all the treasures of Sutton Hoo, as well as some other very noteworthy artifacts from the Anglo-Saxon period. Like I always remind people, the museum is free, so if you're in London, there's no excuse not to go. And believe it or not, digs are still going on at Sutton Hoo itself more than 80 years after the helmet was found, with additional fragments of the Byzantine bucket recovered last year. Depicting a North African hunting scene, this is another clear example of Byzantine handiwork found at Sutton Hoo and elsewhere in England. And there's more to come, as my favorite show in the world, Time Team, is set to do some more excavations in 2025. Okay, so there you have it. One of early medieval Britain's most scintillating specimens of archaeology porn. Yummy. Hey, if you like what you heard, give me that thumbs up below, hit that bell to subscribe, or if you want to support more independent archaeology content, consider contributing to my Patreon, where you can enjoy some exclusive members-only benefits and other goodies. Until the next dig.